and maybe want to hire you.
Got it. Yeah. So yes, the program in Detroit was for students K through 12, where we put together workshops that were very specific to mental health and wellness. Our real idea and how we approach much of our work is like, if you get the information, especially to kids early before there's a problem. So if I generally know how I identify emotions in my body, like, oh gosh, like my heart's pounding, my stomach hurts, I'm sweating, whatever your thing is, like if you're able to identify that and then have some coping strategies on deck just for everyday stress, when these things are increasing, or if there's like a functioning problem as we move on and you're still you already have some skills, you're gonna fare better. So when we work with youth, that's really our motto. And so that K through 12 workshop, those workshops were really developmentally appropriate for those age groups. So that was why, right? So we had like song lyrics and hip hop stuff to help with our older kids, and then, games and more fun stuff for our younger kids. As it relates to what we do with corporations, we lead trainings on a range of topics. So as COVID happened, a lot of people reached out to ask us to talk to their employees about health and wellness via their different HR departments, as it relates to the racial stressors and tensions in this country and how that's coming in on top of COVID. That was making, certain employees and Black employees specifically uncomfortable, but also their colleagues are like, I see my colleagues aren't doing well. And so they took initiatives to say, what can we do for our team that's predominantly whatever group? Or even like if there's organizations within larger organizations, like affinity groups that are particular to Black employees, they're able to provide resources for us to come in and do workshops on how do you cope with this? How do you think about it? How do you process it? How do you move forward with it? And so, we really try to meet people with what their need is. So we have a range of expertise. If there's an idea or there's something that's particular to your company, your firm, whomever that you think needs to be addressed as it relates to wellness, mental health, diversity, equity, inclusion, all of these items are things that we're really passionate about. And we've been able to touch and to think of, and I think that segues nicely into like what can come from it, right? So all those opportunities, all those experiences, all those connections. But I think what's been really dope has been that I've gotten to meet all these different people, right? Like we're on this platform where we don't even know a lot. Like people share so much with us, and we try so hard to share that back. And we've done more of that through our like Authentically Me collection that just went through in May. And I can talk about that later, but people are just so vulnerable with you and open with you. And I get to meet, someone that's like, oh, I've been doing this podcast and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. Can you come talk with us and help us understand this aspect of your work? So it's been cool. And I just say, do it. Like take the first step. You never know, like what can come from it. When Nicole called me, I was just like, yeah, this is a great thing to do. I didn't know it was going to be all that it's been and all that I already can foresee it being, because it continuously grows. It's like a snowball. And
if you do one good work, people will learn about it and then they refer others and so forth. And you're right, it snowballs, and that's awesome. Do you recognize any themes in your clients? Like, do they tend to be Black people or Black owned companies, or are there, white folks out there who are like, hey, I just need to get out of my echo chamber, come in and help me? What do you see?
It's been some of everybody, which is probably the thing that I love the most. And I think a lot of that surge really came when George Floyd, when that time period happened. We had and we got listed in Cosmo magazine as a resource.
Wow.
And we got listed by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention as a resource. We've been in parents.com magazine, like a lot of different things that have happened around our work. And these are people sometimes that we didn't even know they were listening to us. It would be like, they found our website and they found the resources and they were like, go here for all these range of things. So, like through those different exposures, that's really widened the range of people. So it's not only Black, it has been Black owned companies. It's been corporations. It's been schools, school districts. HR departments will reach out to us specifically to ask about like what we offer and what wellness, what they feel are primary concerns. We've had, we do a lot of wellness collaborations. So these are people that are like, we have something coming up with someone who owns a bar institute. So bar is a type of workout, and she wants to expose it to more people. She's a Black woman. The Black community isn't as active with the bar community, and so that's a wellness community collaboration. Yoga instructors, people who highly are connected to like healing energies. It's been such a range because we really know that like wellness happens everywhere. And even like we feature beauticians, barbershops, because a lot of times in the Black community, at least that's the person you may feel most comfortable with, and you're sitting with them for an hour or however long, and they'll get a lot of discussion around all the things that are going on. So it kind of looks a lot of different ways.
How much of this work that you're doing centers on like what we would traditionally call behavioral health or mental health and psychological stuff, as opposed to anything else like improving communication, managerial skill, some of those other things? Are you finding yourselves drawn to these folks because they're like super curious about the mental aspect specifically, or is it like, hey, we just need help navigating?
Right. So a good portion is like more wellness global, right? But that's because a part of our mission is really to stay community based, right? Like we want to stay connected to communities. We want to be partners with communities. We want to be helping communities. And so that always looks a little more diverse, right? But there is an aspect of our work that's like very behavioral, I would say. I mean, I think I'm more of a integrated provider, but I'm more behavioral, like CBT based in general, in like my thinking and treatment approach. But we still have those sector of people that want us to come in and work with like their training program, right? That is within psychology, for example, like where we were all trained in, or wanting us to work with or maybe consult on a project that's very specific to the Black community, and they want this perspective within their development of a particular prevention or intervention or something like that. So because we kind of have that training in that specific background and work, it helps inform a lot of the work we do more globally. But I would say about half and half. We try to keep it balanced.
Do you do stuff internationally?
We will. We were happy to.
Yes, I like to hear that. Yes.
We're happy to. We had some things on the calendar. We were supposed to be potentially in Bali and doing like being a part of a retreat, which was going to kind of have like this yoga element, this more wellness element as well. And it was going to be for Black women in the workplace around stress management. I can't remember all the details, but it was supposed to happen in Bali, supposed to be a small, intimate group, and we were supposed to go and lead some of those like sessions, but COVID. So, yeah.
That seems like everybody's conclusion is
over. If anyone is in the international community and would like to be connected, we would love that. We love to travel. So let me just tell you, this is
who doesn't? Especially if somebody else is paying for it.
Right.
Yeah, the COVID thing has really been challenging, and I want to shift gears a little bit into that and talk about suicide prevention, intervention, postvention. You mentioned AFSP, which is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I've done some work recently with suicide prevention. I mentioned in the firearms community, and that's a whole ball of wax that people who don't want to come get help because they're afraid the government's going to take their guns or whatever, and the clinician's going to tattle on them or what. So with COVID, and I want you to just talk loosely about this, no pointed specific question necessarily, but what are you seeing in terms of, we've worked a lot with the businesses and so forth, workplace depression, anxiety, working from home, all the obstacles that are stacked on people now, trying to raise a family, as well as do their work, as well as educate their children, all in the same space. People aren't allowed to connect anymore. We're losing, community. Suicide rate it's been increasing for the last 7 or 9 years, longer than that, 13, I think, something like that. And, what are you seeing? You do a lot of research with suicide prevention. You do a lot of work with companies. I know what I'm seeing, but this isn't about me. This is about you. You're my guest, and I want to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean, you did a really nice job of laying out all the things that are not going so great in all these different spaces. But to speak to suicide risk aspects specifically in regard to what I'm seeing. So this is kind of like outside of the realm of Black mental wellness and more of my professional as a provider, right? So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist working in a children's hospital. And I mean, so this is coming from the perspective of I'm working with the child, but I'm seeing the family, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so we have had such an increase of just referrals, people needing providers, because I don't think it's just COVID in the sense of like COVID has allowed these things to happen, because yes, that's part of it. But I think of it like how sometimes I use this analogy in therapy. If you're holding a brick for 2 minutes, your arms may feel one way, but if you hold those 2 bricks for like 2 hours, they're going to feel heavier, right? And I think getting to that point, because it's been happening for an extended amount of time, that I think we're really fatigued, right? Like we're just tired. And I don't know if a lot of the solutions or things that we've been doing to try to cope, we're really for like the short term, right? And we're all entering into this space of like, oh my God, this is about to be here. Like this isn't going anywhere. And I think we're just starting to try to think about things in a more, what's actually sustainable, not just what can get me through. You get what I mean? Because we don't even know
Absolutely.
through what, like through to where, like where are we going? We don't know.
Right.
So I'm seeing what you said. Like I am seeing that increase. And I think with kids, I think the biggest concern a lot is around this school, right? So like virtual school just happened. They're really nervous about going back to school in the fall. Some school districts have said you get a choice, and parents are like, oh my God, I'm too nervous, so no. Some are like, I want a choice because I would send him, because doing it at home is creating more stress and more conflict, and we're constantly fighting about, did you do the work? But it's hard for some students, particularly like if I'm working with a kid that has ADHD or anything that maybe makes it more difficult to just sit in a computer and like try to learn something. So I think all of those, like, what are we gonna do, are coming up. And as it relates to, I'm seeing some increase in my adolescence, like ideation around things. I haven't seen any actual like attempts or like methods, any of that within the caseload that I'm working in, but I can see how the isolation piece of this, particularly when we think about risk, like we know social support, community connection, all those things are so protective, right, for a lot of these symptoms. However, I think it's been really important for people to get creative about what connection looks like, right? So I think I've also seen, while I've seen that bad, like the stuff that's not going so well, I've also seen families get creative, right? Where they're developing new traditions. One of Nicole always says is about her family, but she has a daughter, a 7-year-old. They've made this new tradition with her aunt where they get on Zoom and every Sunday they do a dinner together. Like she's cooking.
Cool.
And like now she's actually learning her aunt's recipes, because her aunt's one of those people that's like, nah, you can't know how I'm cooking, get out the kitchen. So it's like creating new traditions. Or, me and some of my college friends, we've been more consistent with like the Hangout app. Have you heard of that? Like where you can go on it and like play games,
No.
like Tattoo, or like Win, Lose, or Draw, or just little games that you can play. And it's called House Party. That's what it's called.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And so like we've been more intentional about connecting. So I think parents and families, even one of my family's mom is struggling with working at home while having to also but parent her child. And so she sets up Zoom dates for her child with friends at the same time as her calls. So they're occupied. Like all these different, I'm also seeing a lot of creativity. I'm seeing a lot more outdoors activity, and, just trying to figure out what do we do, because we got to cope, right? It's just, we're with less resources on how.
Yeah, it was fascinating to me. We my wife and I and the kids went searching for patio furniture the other day, and there's 2 furniture stores next to each other, sandwiching Sportsman's Warehouse. And so in between going to the stores, we went into Sportsman's Warehouse so the kids could look at the stuffed animal heads on the wall and whatnot. And so we cruised in and we looked at like, we immediately went to like the shoes and clothing section, and they had some water shoes on sale for the kids. So we got those. And then we walked around the store, and then Heather says, I need a life jacket, because she didn't have one. And so I said, yeah, I know the story. I was like, yeah, it's up there where the kayaks are. And I was like, wait a minute, there used to be kayaks up there. Are they not selling kayaks? And come to find, and then I look around, I was like, holy cow, the entire camping section was wiped out. All the water sports, all the vests. I mean, it was crazy. And why? Because everything's closed. Where are we going? Outdoors. And, that's sustainable for a period of time. If you live in the north like I do, we get winter, and I don't know what we're going to do in the winter, but I appreciate you sharing some of those strategies that other people are using, because I think that's what we need. We need, what to do. What are some of the hows in how we cope with this? And sustainability is important. It seems